Hey there, this is Real Robin. Let me just start things off by saying, yes, I am recording this on a complete piece of shit webcam microphone. Don't have the money to get a real microphone right now, so you'll just have to put up with this for a little while. Let's dive right into it. Back to the Future 3 is the best Back to the Future movie. I'm not kidding, this is legitimately how I feel, and I know a couple of other friends who feel this way, so I feel a little bit legitimized by that fact. It seems to me, though, that the rest of the world thinks that Back to the Future 2 is the best Back to the Future movie. They're all wrong. Basically, what has happened is everybody is remembering the first maybe half hour of Back to the Future 2. Don't get me wrong, Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd are great as Marty McFly and Emmett Brown. They did a fantastic job in the first film, they do a fantastic job in the second and third film. No problems with the actors at all. The real problem with the movie is that, yes, the first half hour of the movie is fantastic. The special effects are absolutely amazing for the time. The flying car sequence and all of the special effects when he first enters like the new kind of city area and all the futuristic stuff, it all looks really cool. Then it goes downhill from there. Once they leave that future and start time traveling all over the place, it gets really, really depressing. It gets really, really slow. It also gets really, really boring. There are the sections where Marty McFly travels back into the future after traveling like back into the past for a bit. And there's the kind of dystopian future where Biff has taken over everything and he's become essentially the new Donald Trump. And you find out that he has married Marty McFly's mother, given her a boob job, done all this other stuff. It's all it's really, really depressing. It's really not that entertaining. The biggest problem with the film, though, is the large chunk of the movie where Marty McFly is trying to get the sports almanac back from past Biff. And this goes on for a really long time. There's not a hell of a lot of dialogue in these scenes. There's not a lot going on. There's the scene with Marty McFly in the back of the car while he's trying to get the sports almanac back, and a bunch of other stuff happens. It's surprisingly boring. It's a really, really dull patch in the movie. And like I said, the first half hour of the movie is fantastic. It might go for a little bit longer than that. I can't quite remember. But it's not the bulk of the movie. The bulk of the movie is the dystopian future stuff and the sports almanac retrieval stuff, which I just never found all that entertaining. Every time I rewatch the movie, I'm the same. I remember the first half hour of the movie, and I keep getting tricked into thinking that it takes up a greater portion of the movie than it does because the rest of the movie is kind of forgettable, to be honest. And yeah, you're watching the movie and it really, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't really gel that well. And I wish that the really awesome future stuff took up more of the movie. Sadly, it doesn't. These aren't the only problems with the movie. There's also the terrible aging and fake breast makeup on the mother, and the scene with the family in the future where they all have this really, really horrible fake aging makeup. It's not the best in the other two movies, but it certainly hits a real low point here. Uh, yeah, I don't really have that much more to say about Back to the Future 2. It's my least favorite of the Back to the Future movies. It's not terrible, it's just not the best Back to the Future movie, and I feel like a lot of people are just misremembering it. There is one good part of the movie, though. My absolute favorite part of the movie, and that is the trailer for the third movie. They slap it on at the end of the second movie, and it has the most fantastic music in it. I will never get that music out of my head. Every time I think of the third movie, I think of that song. And I always forget that it's not actually in the third movie. It's only in the trailer. And for those of you who can't remember, it's the song that goes da 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 da. I love it. I love it so much. I sing that song with my flatmates all the time because they kind of hold the same view as I do about Back to the Future too. It's just yeah, I love that trailer music so much. It just gets my heart pumping, and the trailer itself is absolutely fantastic. You know, after you kind of put up with the second film, it's all of a sudden, coming soon in theaters. Here is Back to the Future, but it's a fucking western, and it's just like that's a really awesome idea. Like Back to the Future did the awesome future stuff, but the rest of the movie didn't really do anything that interesting. And yeah, they just kind of. I feel like they probably just dumped a lot of stuff with the second film because the third film probably took a lot more effort to make, and they did shoot them back to back, which was a bit kind of revolutionary at the time because they weren't really doing it that much. It was a good way to save money. It was also a good way to get the films out as quickly as possible, especially when you have a movie with such a cliffhanger ending. You know, you've got that scene where Doc Brown accidentally gets sent back in time instead of Marty McFly, and then he gets the letter from the postman who's like, I've been waiting 100 years or so to send you this letter or to give you this letter in this exact place at this exact time. And it's like, holy shit, this is such an awesome idea. The whole traveling back in time to rescue Doc Brown from the Wild West. And then we have Back to the Future 3. As I said at the start of the video, Back to the Future 3, my favorite of the three. Followed closely by the first one. The first one works really well as a sort of fish out of water comedy. Marty McFly is sent back to a period he doesn't really know that well. There's a lot of really awkward situations that he gets into with his past parents. Not so much time traveling and nothing really that out of the ordinary. Back to the Future 3, though, is where they absolutely give it their all. It is a Western comedy science fiction film. And there are not many of those, and I treasure them when they happen. Uh, a couple that spring to mind are. God, I can't even think of many that spring to mind outside of Briscoe County Jr., and that's a TV show which also has the same kind of silly comedy, Western sci fi feel to it. But that show is fantastic, and if you haven't seen it before, definitely worth watching. It is a forgotten gem of the 90s. Only ran for one season, stars Bruce Campbell and a bunch of other fantastic actors. Anyway, I'm getting off track here. Back to the Future 3, Western sci fi comedy. They put so much effort into the sets and like every little detail of this movie. For a comedy, it's a surprising amount of effort put into sort of thrusting you into the Wild West. The saloons are there, like all of the classic scenes are there. You know, you've got the shootouts in the streets and the train scenes and kind of a whole bunch of other really cool stuff that happens. There's some stuff that doesn't really make too much sense. The fact that Marty McFly's ancestors are still the same people, it's still the same actors who are playing the mum and dad. Unless they're inbred, I don't really get how that works. But for the sake of comedy, I'll give that a pass because they're kind of using the same joke from the second and first movie, and it still works really well. It's still really, really funny. Marty McFly wakes up thinking he's at home because his mother is standing over him. Turns out to be his mother from a different time period. It still works. It's still really, really funny. Uh, the great parts of this movie. Okay, I'll kind of rattle off some of my most memorable scenes that I really like that stick in my mind in this movie. And unlike the second film, these scenes are spread throughout the entire movie. I said earlier that the second film suffers from the fact that people just remember the first half hour or so of the movie. The memorable scenes in the third one, though. Okay, so first of all, we have the opening discovery. We've got continuing straight on from the end of the second film. Marty McFly discovers that Doc Brown has been sent back to the Wild West. Where we pick up from, though, is he learns that Doc Brown dies a few days after the letter was sent. And realizing that Doc Brown doesn't exactly have a lot of time back in the Wild West, he decides to track down the 1950s Doc Brown and convince him that he needs to find a time machine, which they find in an abandoned mine shaft, and sort of get it all fixed up and, ready to send Marty McFly back in time so that he can save his, the other Doc Brown's life. It's really, really, it's surprisingly well done. It's really, really kind of creepy. The scene where they go to the graveyard and he finds the grave that, you know, has the exact date of his death and tells him that he was shot in the back by Biff's ancestors over the matter of a very small amount of money. It's ridiculous. And that's what sets this chain of events in motion. They get the car fixed up. There's the fantastic scene where I don't exactly know why they didn't give themselves a little bit more room to drive the car. But anyway, they have the scene where they dress Marty up in Old West clothes so that he'll fit in, puts him in the car, and drives towards a drive-in theater screen with an image of Indians on it. Again, don't know why they didn't allow themselves more room, but it makes for a great visual image where he hits 88 miles per hour right as he hits the screen, and as soon as he hits it, transported back in time, real Indians running at him. The car, something happens to the car, and he ends up running into a cave to get away from the Indians. But it's a really great visual gag, and it works really, really well. Some of the other memorable scenes include there's quite a few references to Clint Eastwood in this film, down to the fact that Marty McFly actually calls himself Clint Eastwood in the past to try and give himself a more badass name. There's this great scene where there is a direct reference to the shootout in A Fistful of Dollars, where Clint Eastwood's character, the man with no name, essentially straps a makeshift bulletproof vest, which is just a big sheet of metal, under his shirt, so that when the bad guys shoot at him, they get really, really scared because he doesn't go down. They repeat the same thing with a kind of similar premise in this movie, and even if you don't know A Fistful of Dollars, I hadn't seen A Fistful of Dollars until many, many years later, it still works really, really well. And it leads to the long-running gag, again, of Biff, or in this case, Biff's ancestor, not dying. No one ever really dies in these movies, but, getting a face full of manure. He hates manure. It's a bit weird that even in the Wild West, which is a setting where you would expect people to die, they still don't go for it. They still keep it very light. The tone is very, very joking. The face full of manure is gross, but you know by this point that it's the character's, like, he fucking hates it. He really, really hates manure. There's also the fantastic scene where Doc Brown has to rescue his love interest, Clara. And yeah, they kind of find out that upon rescuing Clara, who is supposed to go over the edge of a cliff and have a gorge named after her, and yeah, a whole bunch of other stuff, they find out that by rescuing her, they've actually changed the future because she was supposed to die there. They kind of address it a little bit. They don't completely address the major changes that this causes. It doesn't appear to cause any major changes, but again, it's a comedy. It's a comedy sci-fi western. It's all played very lightly. When things do change the future, outside of the really weird dystopian parts of the second film, they're just kind of played for laughs. They'll, change the name of the gorge to something else. The final climax of the movie, my god, this scene is ingrained in my memory whenever I think of this movie, because it is so thrilling and so well done. The scene where they essentially have to push the DeLorean with a train because they don't have the technology back then to actually get the car up to 88 miles an hour. They essentially, it's a great train robbery-esque scene where they ride on horses up to the train, they hijack the train, they take over it, and Doc Brown has come up with these concoctions that he can kind of put in the furnace of the train to make it go super fast. And, there's the whole thing with Clara appears and kind of complicates things, where Doc has to, instead of getting in the DeLorean with Marty, he has to try and rescue Clara, which ends up keeping him back in the past because Marty gets in the DeLorean, drives off the end of the railroad track, and, travels back to his correct time. Doc Brown stays in the past. To this day, it is still one of the most thrilling climaxes of any movie I've ever seen. And again, it's a light Western sci-fi comedy, they put so much effort into this climax. It's unlike anything in the first and second films in terms of thrills. It's just insanely well done, and I will never forget this scene. It is my favorite scene of all of the Back to the Future movies. You know, outside of specific comedy scenes, it is my favorite, just like set piece. It's so well done. And after that, everything just kind of wraps up. You get the great scene where Marty McFly in the car, he's still on the railroad tracks when he returns to his own time, and the car is just destroyed by a train. You know, can never use it again. It's absolutely torn to pieces. It's a very kind of fitting finale to the trilogy. You know, the car is the central thing holding all of the movies together, aside from the main characters. And to just see it get absolutely smashed to smithereens, that's the filmmaker saying, no more. There's not going to be another Back to the Future movie. You know, this is it. You got your 3 movies. The car is absolutely obliterated. That's all you get. They do kind of have a bit of a teaser scene at the end where, you know, Doc Brown and Clara return in this weird time machine train that flies. They don't quite explain how that happened. I have to assume that Doc Brown made a simple time machine train, took it to the future, and somehow got it to fly in the future. It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, but then again, a lot of the stuff in these movies doesn't. But it's a great visual. Like, the sight of the flying train is absolutely fantastic. It's unlike any other vehicle that you will see in movies. I mean, there's a lot of imaginative vehicles in movies, but this one is crazy. It looks great. Yeah, it all kind of it all wraps up pretty neatly. That one leaves it a little bit open, but you know, they never did make another Back to the Future movie. They've made some video games and other things like that. But yeah, they kind of wrap it all up very nicely. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Back to the Future 3, my favorite Back to the Future movie. Back to the Future 2, least favorite. Everyone remembers it. I'm just going to say everyone remembers it wrong. And I think that if you haven't seen the movies in a very long time, you should go back and watch all 3 of them again. Definitely give Back to the Future 3 a chance if it wasn't your favorite the first time around. And it's been quite a long time since you've seen them. Give it another chance. I think you will appreciate it. It's really thrilling. It's really funny. It has a lot of amazing scenes. So much stuff that I haven't mentioned. I don't really have the time to mention every single great thing in the movie, but yeah, give it a shot. I think that a lot of people will come to love Back to the Future 3 just as much as I do. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.